It's 12 minutes before the hour on the Sunrise Morning Show. It's good to have Anne Frailey, author of The Road Goes Ever On, a Christian journey through the Lord of the Rings, with us this morning. Anne, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, there's no mention of Jesus in any of the Lord of the Ring novels. Now, why do you think so many people consider them to be such profoundly Christian books?
Well, I think if you look at where Tolkien was coming from, if you know anything about him, he was a Catholic, raised by a woman who was a converted Catholic, and he considered her a martyr for the faith because she died after losing support from her family because she became Catholic. So for him, I think he took a profound, anchor in her faithfulness to her beliefs. And then he worked through, the First World War. He was in the front lines. He was a signalman. So he really saw life at its core. And I think in seeing that and that level of faithfulness, that level of commitment, he transmitted that understanding of human nature at its best into his writings. And I think that's what God does with us. He calls us to our most noble, to our most authentic aspects. And so that comes through in his writing. And then we see that, we connect with that, and we go, wow, this is profound stuff. And it's because that's what God is calling us forward to.
So how does Tolkien explore the virtues of faith, hope, and charity in his novels?
Well, what I do in my book is I look at each of the characters, like, Sam and Frodo and Aragorn and Gandalf, and I look at how they personified those kind of faithful things. And, I used a lot of Catholic references because in the Catholic Church we have the traditions of what makes, charity, what makes faithfulness. And it's a transcending virtue. It's not just about me feeling this way about a person or me feeling that, I'm in a hopeful mood. It's about a way of life, a vocational vision. And so in the characters, they overcome the temptation to sin. They overcome the hardships of their endurance of a variety of situations. And when they do that, they personify those virtues because they're living beyond a natural existence. They're going into a supernatural world. And so that's kind of what I pull out from that. And then I do the opposite with looking at the vices and the characters who were really, who had fallen and who had gone into dark places, who had personified evil and despair. And so I kind of contrast those and then put it into the modern terms, into our lives. How do we personify the virtue of hope beyond hope when we don't feel hopeful, but we act hopeful, when we don't feel loving, but we act loving, those kinds of things.
What sense of sin does one get from reading Tolkien's vision of Middle-earth?
Well, sin is a broken relationship with God. And even though the book, now The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings do not mention God per se. But if you look at the Silmarillion, there's very direct God references. It's a much deeper, bigger work. And there is more of that architecture in there of the God, the angels, the whole structure is in the Silmarillion. That's where he's drawing from when he created these other stories. And so sin is that broken relationship. In the Silmarillion, he calls it being out of resonance. There's this harmony that God created, in the Silmarillion. And when the bad guys, so to speak, break that, they discord. They cause corruption. And in the same thing in the Lord of the Rings, Frodo has to deal with the mission to overcome the sin, to overcome the temptation to make himself God. And that's what all of them have to do. Aragorn was a perfect example, and I talk about that. He's a king among kings. He's kind of a personification of a man who's saying, even though I'm called to be king, I'm not going to act like that. I'm going to be a servant. And that's what he does, in a very, very humble way. And the overcoming of sin is to put ourselves in our proper place and to let God be God and ourselves his servants. And in that, we are freed to be transformed into the people he wants us to be.
Yeah, a very Christian message without the mention of God or Jesus. But we also see prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, other virtues in the Lord of the Rings, don't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's one kind of the fun things about going into this. I originally wrote this because I homeschool. I have 8 kids, and my kids were fascinated. We had read the story several times, and they were fascinated by the story, and it really touched them. And because we homeschool, we talk about a lot of Catholic faith, a lot of Christian idealisms, and this book personified them in characters that were very, very attractive. And it's not dry, it's not boring, it's not something that you just look at and go, do I have to memorize this? My kids wanted to memorize things from the book. And so I looked at that in terms of other Catholic families who were looking at the same attraction and going, why is this really resonating with children? And it's because kids want to be heroic. And if you look at, take the prudence virtue. Prudence, I take different characters like Legolas. I say he's actually a very prudent character. He knows how to stand his ground, but he's not, even though he has abilities no one else has, he still sees himself as a servant, and he's able to make wise judgments within his realm of experience, within his expertise. And he doesn't try to take Aragorn's role. He's prudent in the best sense of the word, not as a prude, but as a truly heroic character. And each one of those virtues we can live out in the modern world. But you have to kind of take a close look at them and go, what do they really call us to do? And
in your book, The Road Goes Ever On, do you make connections between the characters in The Lord of the Rings to, say, the saints, maybe biblical figures?
Yeah, and that's one of the aspects of the book I've gotten the most feedback from, because people have really enjoyed that. I take some common saints that obviously everybody would know, like Moses, and I compare him to Gandalf. But then I take some, lesser known saints, and I look at them in terms of what was the character's heroic quality that we really like, and then I say, but look at this real life person on earth who has lived and who is now a member of the communion of saints, and we can ask for intercession. This is not a made-up character. This is a real person who did truly heroic things and is still active in the lives of men and wants to assist us if we but call on him, and so, or her. And I look at, St. Teresa, I look at just various saints, and then I compare them, and I go, okay, now make that connection, because these are not dead people. These are people who still live, and they are our intercessors in the communion of saints.
An important connection, a beautiful book, The Road Goes Ever On, A Christian Journey Through the Lord of the Rings. Anne Frailey, the author. Anne, where can we find your book?
Well, I published it through iUniverse, but it's available on Amazon, and then St. Joseph Radio is selling it for me.
All right, we've linked it on our blog at sunrisemorningshow.com, placing it in our Amazon store as well. And we appreciate our discussion this morning, the great book that you wrote. We look forward to having you back again here on the Sunrise Morning Show.
God bless you. Thank you.
You too.